Welcome back. In this lesson, we'll be covering the Maya user interface. I'm going to go ahead and just start up here at the very top. We have the menu bar. What's a little unique about Maya is this menu bar will change depending on the menu set that we're working in. And what I mean by that, we have a pull-down menu right here that allows us to go into different sets depending on what we're working in. So currently we're in the modeling set. If I go down here to rigging, you'll see that everything after Windows changes over to different pull-down menus. And likewise, if I come down to animation, you'll see it change again. I'm going to go back to modeling right here. And the second line down here is referred to as the status line. In addition to the pull-down menu here for our menu sets, we have a number of shortcuts to commonly used functions up here in the menu. So you can find everything under the pull-down menus that you need based on the menu set. It looks a little daunting here with all these icons. These aren't different functions here. These are all just shortcuts to existing functions under the pull-down menus. So for instance, this group right here, these first three are related to new scene, open scene, and save scene. So if I come over here and hover over this, a window will pop up. So this is new scene, open a scene, and save a scene. There's also hotkeys you've noticed here. We've got Control-S, Control-O, and Control-N for a new scene. Okay, and then moving down along here, we have different ways of selecting things. There's hierarchy. We can select by object type or component type. This group right here are other ways of selecting things based on particular components. So we can select curves in a scene, joints if we're working in rigging or animation. Okay, and then moving down here, we have a group of icons with magnets on it. These are all snapping tools, so we can snap to the grid or a curve. There's also hotkeys for these that I tend to use more frequently than coming up here and accessing them on the status line. Down here, just inputs and output. This is a construction history. We want to usually leave this on, especially when we're modeling. And the last group of icons here are for rendering. So I can open up a render window here and click the render button, and you'll see the scene come up here. Okay, and then rendering the current frame. And this one right here is used quite a bit when we go in and begin refining our render settings. Okay, so the next line down here, this is referred to as the shelf, and this is used quite a bit. These are shortcuts again to commonly used functions or tools within Maya. They're divided by different tabs here. We can go to curves and surfaces, sculpting, which is a new feature for 2016, as well as rigging. Rigging used to be part of the animation shelf. It's now been split out on its own. Okay, and that's what these green brackets are. They're just indicating what's new in this particular iteration. And rendering effects, we can also customize things. We can add things. We can create an entirely new shelf, a custom shelf, and place our own shortcuts on here. I'm going to go back to polygons. So if I wanted to add a cylinder to the scene, I could just click right here. It's going to drop it on that center point that I mentioned before, the 000 space. This is the same thing as coming under Create Polygon Primitives Cylinder. I'm going to go ahead and just delete both of those. I already covered the viewport in the previous lesson, so we're going to skip over that and just come over here to the toolbox on the left-hand side, starting with the top tool. This is the select tool. So all this does is select or deselect things in a scene. And there's a shortcut key to that, and it's Q. So instead of coming over here and accessing these tools, you might do that initially, but you'll want to get into the habit of using the shortcuts. They are referred to as QWERTY, Q, W, E, R, T, and Y. Are the main hotkeys that you're going to use. So moving down here, we've got two more icons here. These do not have shortcuts to them. There are different ways of selecting things. So you can use a lasso tool and draw around a scene. You can also use a paint tool and select things by painting on the surface. Moving down here, these next three icons are the ones that are used most frequently. So the move tool, which is W on the keyboard, the rotate tool, E on the keyboard, and the last one is the scale tool, which is R on the keyboard. This last one right here is the last function that I just did, and this is where we use Y. So I'm going to select the move tool, and you can see the icon right here just changed. I'm going to hit F to frame up on that. So this will center around that pivot right there. You can see things are rotating around the center of this object now instead of the center of the world space on the grid. So this move tool allows you to move along those three different axes, X, Y, and Z. And you can see they're color coordinated, just like this icon down here. So we know that this is moving along the Z axis, this is moving along the X, and this is the Y. And then moving down here, I'm going to select the rotate tool, E on the keyboard, and this just allows us to rotate an object, again, along the different axes. And then scale, I'm going to go ahead and bring this back to center here. Okay, so this is the scale tool, and in the center here, this scales uniformly. So if I click and drag that left to right, you can see things scaling up and down. If I want to scale in Y, I would grab the Y manipulator. I could scale that along the Y axis, the X, or Z. Okay? And I'm doing Control Z to just get out of that. Bring it back. That's the undo button, hotkey. So I'm going to jump down to the bottom here. We have the timeline as well as a time slider. This is used in animation. Get into that a little bit more later on. Below that we have the MEL command line. So MEL stands for Maya Embedded Language. This is Maya's particular language that it uses. It's proprietary. And it allows you to come in and type different commands. You know, I could click in here and I could type select-R P cube 1, and that just selected the polycube over here. This gets useful when we come into rigging. We will be using some MEL scripting as well as Python. Maya accepts both those languages. And over here is the command response. So if you get error messages, you'll see this coming up along here. Below that, we have a help line. So this will just give you tips on certain tools that you might be using. It will prompt you to do what's next. And over here, we just have the playback, animation layers, which we have none right now, character sets, as well as auto keyframe toggle on and off, and animation preferences. So this would just access the preference window. This actually goes to all the preferences within the scene, and cover this a little bit more later on. The last window I'm going to open up here, this is the script editor. So I mentioned the Maya embedded language. Everything that's happening within the scene is all being executed right here. So if I select the sphere, you can see that I just selected it right there. And then if I wanted to execute a command here, so if I select both of these right here and I hit the enter key, it deselected the sphere and selected the P cube. Okay. Okay, I'm going to come over here and cover these last four icons. Currently, we're in the channel box layer editor. The channel box covers all the different attributes that can be animated within a scene. So in this case, translate X, Y, and Z, rotate, scale, and visibility on and off. So if I wanted to toggle on and off the visibility, I could type in off, or come back in here and type on, or 1 will turn it on, 0 will turn it off. And if I use the various tools here to scale, rotate, you'll see all that information showing up over here. So this is Maya's way of identifying where something is within a scene. And again, we can keyframe all of this once we start animating. We'll be setting keyframes on our character and moving them around. I'm going to hit Control Z and back out of that again. Down here is some information about this shape. Again, it's the P-cube shape that we're working with. And here are inputs. If I come down here to the inputs, there's our P-cube. And it gives us some information down here. If I wanted to come in here and make some changes to that, I can either do it individually by typing in a number. I could click and drag on all three of these right here and type in a number as well. I could also click and drag on all of these right here, and with my middle mouse button, you can see the cursor changed right there. I can control it like that, so I'm sliding left to right with my mouse. Okay. So that's the channel box. Below here we have the layer editor. So we have 3 different ways of creating layers within our scene. The first one is display. So if I wanted to put this cube on its own layer, I could come over here, this last icon right here will create a new layer and assign the selected object onto that layer. So I have a little bit more control toggling things on and off over here in the layer editor, as opposed to coming up and typing on or off in the visibility. Okay, and if I want to deselect that from the scene, I can right mouse click and remove the selected item. And let's say I want to put the sphere in there, come over here, right mouse click and say add selected. So now I have the sphere associated with that display layer. Okay, coming over to the render tab. So this allows me to set up multiple layers when I'm getting ready to render my scene. I've completed all the texture and lighting and animation, and now I'm getting ready to render it. I would want to break out the characters from the scene. I might want to break up the background into foreground, middle ground, background, so I have control over depth of field if I'm doing anything with the camera. And if I have anything particular in the scene that might be rendering, such as light passes or shadow passes, I can break all those different things out into multiple render layers. Okay? And the last tab over here is for animation. So if I have a very complex scene with a lot of characters in here or things moving around, I would probably want to break those out into different layers so I have control over them. Okay, and then the next icon over here, this opens up the tool settings for the tool that is currently selected. Right now we're on the rotate tool. So if I wanted to come in here and change the orientation of the axis, I could do that. To world, currently it defaults on object, so I'm rotating it around the object. And it gives us a number of different functions here that we can work with. Once we start modeling, we'll come in here and use a lot of these tools. Okay, but just know that every tool has its own settings and you can reset them. You can also get help by hitting the tool help. Go ahead and collapse that. And the next one over here is the attribute editor. That's also Control A will open that. You can toggle back and forth between channel box and the attribute editor. So the attribute editor actually has some of the attributes that were in the channel box. If I go back to the channel box, there's the translate X, Y, and Z. If I come back over here, here's translate. So we see those same numbers, X, Y, and Z. So the difference between the attribute editor and the channel box editor, what's in here are things that can be animated. Over here, these are all the attributes associated with a given object within a scene. Okay, so we know that it's been assigned to layer 1. So we see that tab right there. You can also come down over here and I assigned it its own unique material, which can be changed. Make it yellow. Okay, and then this last one over here is the modeling toolkit. And this has a lot of new features and functions within it that allow you to streamline your workflow when you're modeling. Okay, so this pretty much covers everything within the Maya user interface. Again, I would say get very comfortable with using QWERTY, those hotkeys for selecting, moving, scaling, rotating. And we'll come back in the next lesson and start modeling a scene.